Every leap into the unknown is a risk. Modern psychologists call this growth mindset, a willingness to push boundaries towards something new. The archetypes of tarot call it the fool. And sometimes it shows up in our culture as protesters taking to the streets demanding a better future. But not every risk is welcomed. Sometimes the leap meets a wall. Psychologist Carol Dweck calls this a fixed mindset, insisting that things are what they are and that they cannot be changed. In the tarot, this is the Emperor in the reverse. And today, this decision to refuse change, to control others, can be seen in the armored vehicles that line the streets of DC and LA. As thousands march for immigrant rights in our major cities, they take a leap towards equality and dignity, just as Thomas Paine did when he called out tyranny and asked American colonists to begin the world over again with a new form of government. But the administration has answered, with Marines and National Guard troops stationed like a human wall near monuments and facilities, a fixed response to a living need. Through the lens of tarot, these aren't just cards, they're choices. The Fool's Leap, growth, possibility, and courage to begin again. The Emperor reversed, fixed, rigid, condemning instead of protecting. One opens the future, the other locks it down. I'm Alice. This is Myth, Magic, and Power. Follow me down this rabbit hole. The Fool is card 0, the leap without guarantees, hope in human form. The moment you step forward because staying still is no longer an option. That is the leap that people take when they cross borders, rivers, deserts, just at a shot for safety and a better life, leaving everything that they've ever known behind them and facing danger head on. Reverse, that leap meets the line of troops in the street. It meets the detention gate at Alligator Alcatraz. It meets checkpoints and federal control in DC. The Fool's hope is met with the Emperor's refusal. The Emperor is structure, order, the architect of laws. Upright, he builds systems that keep people safe. Housing, courts, protections. His first defense is care, keeping the vulnerable alive and the community whole. But reversed, he builds walls instead of shelters. He turns rules into weapons. The upright emperor could have protected immigrants seeking asylum and protesters in the streets. Reversed, he sent armed troops to shadow them. At Alligator Alcatraz, the upright emperor could have ensured humane conditions. Reversed, he allows people to rot, while the rules claim that nothing is wrong. In DC, the upright emperor would spend his energy safeguarding protesters. Reversed, he treats the nation's capital like a military outpost and promises to spread the occupation to other cities. In 1776, America radiated Fool energy, and nobody embodied this better than Thomas Paine. Paine was not a polished founding father. He wasn't rich. He didn't own land. He was a failed tax collector, a failed corset maker, even a failed teacher. He arrived in America with little more than a letter from his hero, Benjamin Franklin, and a restless mind. By the time he stepped off the dock in Philadelphia, the colonies were simmering. British troops in the streets, taxes and trade restrictions tightening like a noose. The occupation of Boston by British troops, still fresh in people's minds. Soldiers quartered in homes, streets patrolled, dissent met with force. Paine saw in Boston the pure shape of tyranny. A distant monarchy prioritizing its power over the lives of the people. It became one of the sparks that convinced him that independence was the only solution. His pamphlet, Common Sense, didn't beg the crown for reform. It dared the colonies to reinvent the world. We have it in our power to begin the world over again, he thundered. That's not just rhetoric. That's Fool energy in its purest form. The leap without a guarantee, convinced that the ground will rise to meet you. This is also the frame of growth mindset, a willingness to try a different path, to know that an imagined world can become real. Paine pushed all kinds of boundaries. He argued against slavery. He called for justice for the poor. He wrote like a man who had been broken, but refused to stay silent. Paine understood that before revolutions can succeed, they survive. And survival depends on people being able to stand, speak, and gather without being met by an army in their streets. In Common Sense, he dismantled monarchy with words sharp enough to draw blood. He wrote that government was but a necessary evil and claimed that the English Constitution was designed to hide responsibility. His metaphors were wild, and his truths were sharper. He compared loyalty to the crown to a man too besotted with a prostitute to choose a wife. He called British rule in Boston a prison without hope of redemption, and he argued that it was absurd for an island to govern a continent. In no instance hath nature made the satellite larger than its primary planet. He proposed a government built for the people. Fair representation, a domestic focus, freedom of religion, and a healthy respect for diversity of faith and background. And independence wasn't just necessary, it was inevitable, and the public devoured it. Common Sense sold nearly 500,000 copies in a population of just 2.5 million. The 18th century equivalent of going viral. Farmers, merchants, soldiers at campfires all read the same words. The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth. The birthday of a new world is at hand. It's the same current that you feel as marchers in both LA and DC continue to demand dignity, holding their ground in the face of an occupation. This is the leap that says we can begin the world over again. But the leap always lands. After the revolution came the Constitution. The Federalist Papers, the courts, the laws, the emperor arriving to turn ideas into structures. And at first he built stability, but soon those structures excluded whole swaths of people. The leap hardened into control, and the gates narrowed. And Paine himself, the man who lit the spark, died nearly alone, buried in an unmarked grave, called a heretic for questioning religion. His leap helped build a nation, and that nation turned its back on him. That's the emperor reversed in miniature, and it's a reminder, if we aren't vigilant, every leap risks becoming another wall. The full emperor struggle is not an abstraction. It's the protesters and soldiers in our streets. It's Florida's detention cells. The fool shows up in an immigrant's treacherous journey, and protesters' courage, and the hunger striker who collapses in a detention center, wakes in a hospital, and refuses to give up. Every leap, whether into the streets or across a border, deserves to be met with help, not harm. That is the measure of a just power. The emperor upright could meet these leaps with compassion and protection, but reversed, he uses his power to stand guard over the status quo. In our cities, turning soldiers into a warning. In Florida, turning silence into dehumanizing conditions. And in DC, turning our nation's capital into a staging ground for more control. So, which story are we telling now? Are we still the fool, daring enough to leap towards something better? Or have we become the emperor reversed, guarding the gate instead of opening it? Every country, every movement, every one of us contains both. The fool's spark and the emperor's walls. The dream, the danger, the leap, and the landing. The question is, which energy will lead us next? The leap that builds life and growth, or the wall that remains rigid and unyielding? What we choose says everything about the future we are building. And the card that we pull now, that's on us.